Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak today. It is an honor to speak in support of David. Now, David was cleared by the Bristol University's QC-led investigation of anything, of any violation of the Equality Act 2010. He was cleared of any racist charges, but yet he was fired. What has happened to him is an extension of the type of thinking that led to the Palestinian Prisoners Studies Center reporting that between 2015 and 2018, over 500 Palestinians, among them children, were arrested by the Israeli state for activity on social media. He is guilty of largely quoting the very organizations that have campaigned for his removal, merely quoting their own tax filings, their own websites, and their own public pronouncements. So, for example, the very first issue that he was organized against on by CST, and then they had to pass it to the UJS, was the involvement of Zionist organizations in the Islamophobia industry. This is empirical and well documented. Sarah Marusek found that 75% of the organizations that fund the Islamophobia industry and the think tanks involved with it also fund the building of Israeli settlements in clear contravention of international law. When we look at who is the most iconic figure of Islamophobia in this country, it's Tommy Robinson, without a doubt. Tommy Robinson was funded by the Middle East Forum. The director of the Middle East Forum is Greg Roman, a former employee of the Israeli Ministry of Defense and the Foreign Ministry. Tommy Robinson was also employed by the David Horowitz Freedom Center as a Robert Shillman scholar. Robert Shillman was on the board of directors for the Friends of the IDF and also funds the Jewish National Fund, which builds illegal settlements in the West Bank. Robinson went to the West Bank in the Israeli-occupied Syrian Golan Heights, posed on the back of an IDF tank and said he would publicly fight for Israel in war. Katie Hopkins also was employed by the David Horowitz Freedom Center and has publicly advocated for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. Now, the very same organizations that fund the Middle East Forum and the David Horowitz Freedom Center also fund the settler group Elad in the West Bank, who are currently cleansing Silwan and Sheikh Jarrah of Palestinian inhabitants. The Middle East Forum's work as a think tank was quoted 13 times by Anders Breivik in his manifesto. Sheldon Adelson, the biggest funder of Israeli settlements, also funded many different Islamophobic groupings. This is well documented and can clearly be discerned by looking at the tax filings of the very organizations that we are speaking about. It's not a conspiracy theory. What about the Union of Jewish Students? It is constitutionally a pro-Israeli organization. It is a member of the World Union of Jewish Students, which is part of the World Zionist Organization, meaning it has representation at the World Zionist Organization. It receives funding from the Israeli embassy. Its chief executive is Aria Miller, who was previously the head of digital media and Jewish community relations at the Embassy of Israel in the United Kingdom. It has a few programs which act as a gateway through which members of the UJS can become part of the IDF. It has something called the Massa Journey Program, which directs students towards Garin Tazabur, a particular program that enlists foreign nationals into the IDF. According to the IDF, it has helped over 1,500 teens from all around the world enlist in the military. And it is estimated that 70% of those that get into the IDF through these programs stay on after their service. Also, it directs people through the Massa Journey program to MAVA. Now, that's an organization that takes children from the Israeli state and trains them with M16s with live ammunition in the Nakab Desert on the Gadna base. That also is something that people that come through this MASA program, that people can come through the UJS to take part in, also join and become assimilated into. Students that are part of the UJS can become what is called an Israel Campus Fellow. What does that mean? Well, according to the UJS's own website, becoming an Israel Campus Fellow means you get, quote unquote, exclusive access to top speakers. You get access to resources that help you facilitate Israel-related events. You can, quote unquote, be the leader for national and sometimes international Israel campaigns. You've even seen a pipeline of those in important positions within the UJS go on to have important positions within the Israeli state. For instance, the former campaign director, Yair Lapid, went on to be the press officer for the IDF and later the international media coordinator for Shimon Peres as president of Israel. We also know that it works closely with BICOM, which is a part of the Israel lobby, an essential part of the Israel lobby. We also know that there are 7,000, according to IDF sources, 7,000 lone soldiers within the Israeli army. Those are people who are not Israeli citizens, but serve in the IDF nonetheless. And an organization like the UJS, through the Massa Journey program and where it directs members of this union towards, are basically part of the facilitation of an infrastructure of violence towards the indigenous population, the Palestinians. Now, who else militated against David Miller? Our former housing minister, Robert Jenrick, has said that he wrote repeatedly to Bristol University seeking Professor David Miller's dismissal from the job. Now, Robert Jenrick describes Aidan Ofer, a Tory donor, as a close family friend. Now, who is Aidan Ofer? His brother, his father, and his nephew have all run the company Zodiac Maritime Limited. Now, it's registered in this country. Zodiac Maritime Limited and the Ofer family shipping company, according to the Sunday Times in 2011, was being used, quote unquote, to ferry elite Israeli forces for operations inside Iran. It was the shipping company that moved people using foreign passports, agents for the Israeli state, into Dubai to carry out the killing of the Hamas member Mabhouh in a hotel room. Zodiac Maritime Limited is a front for Israeli intelligence. Aidan Ofer is part of that family. Now, that, as far as I'm concerned, is a clear correlation between what Robert Jenrick has sought to do and his relationships with seriously dangerous and suspicious figures. Look at the Community Security Trust, who originally tried to bring this charge against David when he was pointing out the links between Islamophobia and Zionist organizations that fund settlements in the West Bank. Well, Anthony Lehrman, the founder of the Institute for Jewish Policy Research, has said that CST volunteers have received training from Israel's External Intelligence Service. It was founded by Gerald Ronson. Gerald Ronson, a very close friend of Benjamin Netanyahu, funded his political campaign. And actually, if you look at Peter Oborn's brilliant 2009 documentary about the Israel lobby in this country, he recalls a meeting at the house of the Israeli ambassador with the president of the Board of Deputies, with Gerald Ronson, the founder of the Community Security Trust, and Pojo Zlebludovic, who's the founder of BICOM. Now, they are raging about an article in The Guardian which compares the state of Israel to apartheid South Africa. So who do they decide to send to Alan Rusbridger to confront him, the editor of The Guardian at that time? They send Gerald Ronson and the president of the Board of Deputies. Rusbridger said of this meeting, their pitch was that The Guardian was encouraging anti-Semitism and that this article was an incitement of violence against Jewish people. So quite clearly you see here that the Board of Deputies, who have not been pulled up anywhere in the media on the fact that in their own trustees' report, following the bringing down of Jeremy Corbyn, put the following sentences. They have a close, and this is according to their trustees' report, not me. They have a close working relationship with the Embassy of Israel in the UK. They have strengthened links with the Ministry of Strategic Affairs, whose sole purpose is combating BDS, and with the IDF. Now, no one in the media has problematized this about the Board of Deputies. What we also know about the Community Security Trust is that they are recipients of about £14 million a year of taxpayer money. They've been intimately involved in the campaign against Corbyn. Also, we've also seen Mishkon Direya, a key part of the anti-BDS campaign and the campaign against Corbyn, advising the UJS on how to bring down David Miller. Now, what's happened to David is clear and would be clearer if on a societal level, we had some type of literacy about the way organizations run influence campaigns. It's time for us to stop beating around the bush. Thousands upon thousands of people have been thrown out the window over this period. Okay, we've seen over 120,000 people leave the Labour Party, whether they've been kicked out on spurious charges, whether they have left by their own volition following the bringing down of Corbyn. Let's stop beating about the bush. Let's stop triangulating. Let's stop obfuscating, and let's be clear about this influence campaign that has been run. Because at the same time, organizations were pushing to bring down David Miller, one of many, you also saw the UK Lawyers for Israel and the Board of Deputies editing textbooks that would be used in schools on this issue of Palestine. You also see other organizations pushed into schools really with the purpose of normalizing Zionist apartheid and colonization of Palestine. We have to be clear about this. We have to be honest about this.
I can hear lots of virtual applause.